I'm Lynae Colson, interviewing for the Newkirk Public Library and Newkirk Historical Society. Today's date is January 18, 1989, and the camera person is Chris Clark. The person I'm interviewing is Pauline Goulden in her home on Cedar. Pauline, where and when were you born?
I was born near Blackwell, September 18, 1910.
Was you at home?
I was in my grandparents' home.
Born in your grandparents' home. How long did the mothers have to stay in bed?
The mothers had to stay in bed 9 days.
What was your parents' names?
My mother's parents was Elijah Seaman from Illinois and Edna Wiley from Wisconsin, and they come to Washington, Kansas in 1964, and they married, and they had 6 children. And I think it was about 1900 they come to Ponca City, and they brought their machinery and their livestock in a freight car on the train, and all of them rode on the train.
Okay, I think you said 1964. They came from Wisconsin in 1864.
1864 is when they come from Wisconsin. When my grandmother come from Wisconsin, right?
I just wanted to get that.
Oh, that okay.
What nationality were your grandparents?
They were partly Irish, is all I know. Now, my grandparents' Shoup were Andrew Shoup and Julie Shoup Street, and they come from North Carolina with their 12 children to Arkansas City in 1891. And they made the run into the Cherokee Strip, and they didn't get a claim, but they settled near Blackwell. They bought a small farm, and they were farmers.
Did you have any that was in the Civil War?
My grandfather Shoup was in the Civil War.
What about brothers and sisters?
I had 6 brothers and 2 sisters.
Did they all live to adulthood?
My brother Orville passed away when he was 4 months old with a whooping cough.
What did your parents do for a living?
My parents were farmers.
Did your father own any machinery?
Yes, my father had horse-drawn machinery, and he owned and operated a threshing machine for several years. And this was a steam engine, and then there was a separator, and he would put them face to face, and a large belt connected them, and the wheel on the steam engine, whenever he turned the engine on, it would start the belt, and there was the other end of the belt was on the separator, and that started the process of thrashing the grain. And to prepare this grain for thrashing, he had a wheat binder, and it was full of horses, and he would cut the wheat and put it into bundles, and then the bundles, men would come along and put them into shops. And whenever all the neighbors around got their wheat cut, then the thrashing process would start, and he would go from place to place and charge them so much a bushel to thrash their wheat. And the way they got the wheat to the separator, they would take hay racks drawn with horses, and then they'd bring these bundles up to the separator and put them in there one by one, and they used a pitchfork to do this. And then the wheat would separate from the chaff, and the straw would go out in a big blower at the back of the elevator and make a straw stack. And then the wheat would come out the side in a spout, and they'd fill a lumber wagon that was pulled by horses, of course. and uh, they would fill the wagon, and then they'd switch the spout over into another wagon, and two men would take this filled wagon to the granary, which was near the barn, and they would scoop it off from the granary. And then, as time permitted later, they would scoop the wheat back in the wagon and then haul it to the elevator in the nearest town.
When did the threshing machine get replaced, and what with?
The threshing machine got replaced with the combines. It was about 1925. It was along in the 20s someplace. And my father did get a smaller operation of thrashing, and he'd done that for several years, but it wasn't very long until the combines took over.
About how many people did it take to run this thrashing machine?
It would take about 25 at least, and my dad had what you call a cook shack, and this is where he fed the men, and it looked kind of like our trailer houses when they first come into existence, and the inside of it, the dining table and the benches was made of lumber, and then they made the cabinets of lumber, and then it had a wood stove is what they cooked on, and they had no water system and no ice box, no ice, and for cooling they had doors on the sides of this, and the doors would open from the bottom about where the tables began, and then they would open out upward, and they'd be propped open, and then there were screens on the side of the trailer so that the flies couldn't get in.
Did your father work on any ranches?
Yes, before my father was married, and a short time afterwards, he worked on the Big V and the Little V ranches, and they helped they traded work back and forth with the 101 ranch. So he worked on the 101 ranch too, and he worked with Bill Pickett. He's the Negro man that invented rodeo bulldogging. And if you'll notice in the papers yet today, quite often there'll be something come out about Bill Pickett, and he is. They have had statues of him, and at the Fort Worth stockyards in Fort Worth, they have a real nice statue of him.
Some people had certain days to do things. Did you?
Well, yes, for the most part, Monday'd be the wash day, and Tuesday would be the ironing day, and then Wednesday, my mother would do the mending and kind of catch up on the house cleaning and the cooking, and then I think it was Thursday that usually was Ladies' Aid Day, where the church ladies met and quilted, and then our big day was Saturday, when we'd clean the house and do the baking and get ready for company for Sunday, and then try to fix something for our school lunches the following week.
Tell me, did the family go to town regularly?
My dad bought most of the groceries, but we did go to town, and he had a surrey that was pulled with 2 horses, and in the wintertime, when it was cold, they would heat bricks and they'd wrap them in newspaper and put them on the floor for our heater, and then there would be side curtains on the buggy. And then when we got to town, they had livery stables, and we could unhitch the horses and put them in there for a fee, and or we could just tie them up to a hitching post that's all along Main Street. And
well, what did you look forward to most when you was going to go to town?
Well, I kind of liked the grocery store. It was always kind of fascinating to me. And we'd go in the store, and there'd be a clerk up in front, and my folks would tell him what they wanted and how much, and he'd write it all down, and there'd be chairs there for us to sit in, and we'd sit there and wait, and the men would put up our groceries and bring them already boxed, and we would take them to the buggy. They had no grocery boys to carry out anything.
When did you usually buy your shoes?
Our shoes usually was bought around in August, so we'd be ready for the school term.
Do you ever remember them being rationed?
I think they was rationed in World War II.
Do you know what the reasoning was?
Well, not really. It might have been a shortage of help to make them. I really don't know.
Did you guys have a picture show there in town?
Well, in later years we had a picture show, and that was one of the highlights that we had. We would go to the show, and of course there was no voice, but they put it on the screen, write it on the screen, and you would have to read what was going to be next.
Did somebody play a piano?
Usually somebody played.
Did you visit relatives?
Yes, we did. We visited relatives. We had relatives in Blackwell and Ponca that we visited quite often, and then one of the highlights of our visitations, my father had a sister over in Osage County, east of Ponca, and they would put straw or hay in a lumber wagon and put blankets over it and put us children, there was 4 of us at that time, in there, and we'd go over to the Osage and spend the weekend, and then we'd come back home.
When did you start school?
I started school when I was 6 years old.
How many grades and rooms?
There was 8 grades and 1 room and 1 teacher.
What were the subjects that you took?
Well, we took the first thing in the morning would be reading, and then the second after recess would be arithmetic, and then in the afternoon would be history and physiology and spelling, and then so many days a week we did have penmanship.
You mentioned recess. What did you do at recess?
Well, there wasn't much to play with, so the boys sometimes would play ball, or we'd play black man, and then shinny. That was quite a game. The boys would have a tin can, and they'd choose up size, and they'd all have a stick, and they'd see who could get the tin can the farthest from them.
Well, how did you get a bat for baseball?
They just used limbs made out of trees. I think their fathers probably fixed them bats, just saw limbs, and they shape it up pretty good, and it worked pretty good.
What was the time that you went to school and you got out?
We went to school at 9 o'clock, and we got out at 4.
And how many months?
8 months out of the year.
Did your mother make soap?
My mother made soap, yes.
And how did you do your laundry?
We done our laundry with the washboard, and in later years we did get a hand-pulled washing machine.
Now the handle, is that what agitated?
That's what agitated it. You'd pull the handle real fast back and forth, and it would stir on the inside and clean the clothing.
What did you cook on?
We cooked on a wood stove.
And how would you regulate the heat for that?
Well, there was a damper up on the chimney, and if we didn't want it to burn so much, we'd turn the damper a certain way, and then we had to be careful how much wood or coal. Sometimes we would have coals with the wood, but it would usually be wood, but we wouldn't put so much in, and it wouldn't make so much heat that way.
Did you use a sourdough starter with your cooking?
Yes, my mother always made the bread, and she used a sourdough starter. And to start that, um, it took some yeast. It just took the place of yeast. And each time that she would make the bread, before her dough got thick, she would have to take some more out and put it back in the jar to ferment for the next time she made bread.
What was your job around the house?
Well, my job was to help cook and wash dishes. My older brother and I'd wash the dishes and he would dry them, and then take care of the smaller children. It was quite a job. My mother had leakage of the heart, and she wasn't too well.
Did you have an inside bathroom?
No.
How did you take your baths?
Well, the way we took our baths, we would bring in a galvanized tub and fill it probably about half full of water, and we'd put it in the wintertime when it was cold, we'd put it by the cook stove, and there'd be a fire in there to keep us warm, and we'd just start from the littlest to the biggest.
Did you butcher animals?
My father butchered quite a few hogs, and he cured the meat. Sometimes it would be in brine, and then sometimes it would be with just a salt process of some kind, and he'd wrap it in newspaper and put it in the cellar or in the attic, and it would stay the whole year, really.
And what about beef?
We didn't butcher much beef. Not until the lockers come in, which of course was later years than that.
The flu epidemic came through in 1918. Did that affect your family?
My father's the only one that had the flu.
What about diphtheria?
I had a brother and a sister that had diphtheria, and my brother, they had to take him to the hospital and cut a hole in his throat and put a tube in there so he could breathe. But he recovered, and my sister recovered and had real good health after that.
And what about typhoid fever?
My sister Opal and I had typhoid fever, and I was real bad. I was in the hospital 5 weeks, and an ambulance come out and got me. We lived 16 miles from Blackwell, and they took me to the hospital, and they said for 2 weeks I never moved. Now I don't remember, I of course don't recall anything like that, but I was in the hospital 5 weeks, and then altogether at home I was there about 4 more weeks.
Did you have a radio or TV, telephone in your house?
We never had a radio or TV, but we did have, when I was about 12 years old, we did have a telephone, a country line, where you rang the phone and everybody could listen to you.
What was your home entertainment?
Our home entertainment was mostly dominoes and checkers.
What did you eat around the house?
The folks would always go to the apple orchard and get apples, and they'd keep all winter, and then we'd have pecans, and my dad raised peanuts, and we'd have peanuts. So Mother'd always have something prepared for the evening for us to eat. Of course, we had to study quite a bit, but when we had a chance on the weekends, we liked to play dominoes and checkers.
Did you attend church?
We never got to attend church until I was 12 years old, when we moved northwest to Blackwell.
And was there anything special the church did?
Well, the thing I remember the most, we had a picnic once a year, and we sure looked forward to that. And we went up on the Chakasky River up north and west of Blackwell, and we'd have our picnic lunch. And then after the lunch, we would go in swimming. And our swimming suits was, we'd all take an old dress and an old pair of bloomers, and we put them on, and that was our swimming suits.
During the dust bowl, how did you keep the dust out?
Well, we mostly hung wet sheets by the windows, over the windows, and we just had to keep the windows tight shut all the time, and maybe put some paper around in the larger cracks, and that's about all we could do.
What did you do for birthdays?
Now for birthdays, my mother'd always bake everybody a birthday cake. When their birthday come, we knew that we was gonna get a birthday cake. And that was the biggest thing of our birthday, was this birthday cake.
What about Christmas?
And Christmas, we'd all get a toy, and we'd get a lot of fruit and some clothing. We'd all get articles of clothing.
Did your mother sew?
My mother was a good seamstress, and she done all the sewing for us girls and made shirts for the boys. And it took her quite a while to keep up with the sewing.
Did you have any musical instruments in your home?
My mother had an organ, and she could play the organ just real good. She played it by ear, and that always fascinated me. I, to this day, don't know how she done it. And she was a good soprano singer, and she would sing a lot, but she really enjoyed her organ.
When and where did you get married?
Leslie and I got married in Wellington, Kansas in 1935.
Now, did he have a special birthday?
Yes. Leslie was born the day that Oklahoma became a state. That was November 16, 1907. And there's an organization down at Guthrie, and I've kind of forgotten a great lot about it, but there are several people that was born on this day in Oklahoma. And when Oklahoma celebrated their 75th anniversary in 1982, they was special mention, and they had the people that were living there, and they entertained them special. But Leslie passed away in April before this birthday, so he didn't get to enjoy that.
Were you chivoried when you got married?
Well, yeah, we were chivoried. A lot of people come, and we give them candy and cigars, and we just visited, and that's about all there was to that.
So you were the fortunate ones that had a treat for them. Is it my understanding that if you didn't have anything for them, they would do something?
Oh yes, they'd take you and put you in a wheelbarrow probably, and they put the woman. I think they put the bride in the wheelbarrow, and the groom would have to push the wheelbarrow around and just do things like that.
What did the two of you do for a living?
We farmed, and then when we lived on the Warren Ranch, we had a large operation of farming and ranching too. And then in later in 1946, we bought a farm 11 miles east of Newkirk and a mile south. And then it wasn't very long until Leslie went to work for the Vickery Ranch, and he worked for them 20 years. And I worked in the school lunchroom for 14 years.
Okay, did you have any children?
We had 2 daughters, Beatrice and Arlene.
And where were they born
They were born in the Ponca City Hospital, but they were born when we lived on the Warren Ranch.
at? And whereabouts is that located from Newkirk?
That's east of Newkirk, about 6 miles, and then north. Well, Arlene really wasn't born on the Warren Ranch, but it was a house right south of there.
Did your husband have any hobbies?
Yeah, Leslie did. He had hobbies. He was a coon hunter, and he had good dogs. And he would go coon hunting, and men would come from so many places to go hunting with him. And when we lived on the ranch, once a year the Chilocco Indian boys would come down, and he would take them hunting, and they really did enjoy that. And their sponsor come with them, and every probably 30 minutes they would have to stop and count the boys. They would go through a line and to see that they were all there, that none had escaped. And then he took other boys hunting too. He liked to do that. And after we moved east of Blackwell, or Newkirk, I mean, whenever the hunting season was over, which the hunting season was in December and January. That's the only months you could keep the coon. And after he'd catch them, the next morning he would skin them and stretch them out and tack them up. And then when he went to sell them, he would take them all down, and then he'd tack them up on the granary, and I would take a picture of them. And 86 one season is the most that he ever caught. Usually I think it probably averaged around 50.
Was he recognized with his 86?
One time I called the Ponca City newspaper, and they come out and took a picture, and they put it in the paper.
You had mentioned that you cooked at a school. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the school pupils got fewer, and we had to consolidate our schools. The Call 8 come in, and we had 6 districts went together, and we called it Consolidated 106. And the districts was Sweetwater and Cantwell and Cooper and Pleasant Valley and Canadian. And they built a large schoolhouse, and when they built the schoolhouse, they didn't think about a lunchroom. So they fixed, out of the cloakroom, I think, part of the cloakroom, they fixed a lunchroom, very small, and they cooked there. I wasn't the first cook there. And then later, they built on a lovely dining room and kitchen, and put the bathrooms in. Now that's the first time that the bathrooms was in the one Consolidated 106 school.
That how far was 106 located from Newkirk?
It was 9 miles east of Newkirk.
And can you tell us a little bit about when you did your cooking? Was you by yourself when you did this, and how many did you cook for?
I would go of a morning, and I'd usually make rolls at least 3 days a week. We had hot rolls, which the children really enjoyed, and get everything, the meat on and everything cooked, ready to serve. And at 11:30, 2 of the students would come in and help me to get it finished up on the trays. And then the children would help me. They would eat with the others as they come in, and then as they got through eating, they would all have to scrape their plates, and they'd form a line and scrape their plates, and they'd go on out and play.
Was it always the same 2 children?
And the children took turns. They would have a week to help me, and believe me, they watched to see that they didn't miss their week, because they really enjoyed it.
Did you have other involvement in the school than cooking?
We had a real good 4-H club in our school, and I was one of the leaders for 21 years.
Now, did they also hold a church at the school?
Yes, we had a church and a Sunday school as long as the school was there. And our largest attendance was 112, but that was just a special occasion when one of our neighbor boys become a minister and come back and preach. We had 3 ministers from our Sunday school, 3 boys to go into the ministry. And we had church every Sunday, and a lot of these ministers would be boys that thought they would like to go into the ministry, and they would come out and they would give real good talks. And then we did have regular ministers. Some were retired ministers, but we had Sunday school and church every Sunday.
Do you remember some of the names of those ministers?
Well, Mrs. Weatherman down here preached for us for quite a while, and then Kearney Graham preached for us. He was one of the boys that become a minister while our Sunday school was out there.
Well, what caused the church and the school to close down?
Well, that's when the collate come in, and it moved so many people out, and we didn't have enough children to operate the school the way that the state required it. So that was when we had to go to consolidate with another school.
What made your decision to move to town?
Well, my husband passed away in 1982, and I stayed on the farm 2 more years, and then I decided that it would be better for me to move to town.
Are you involved quite a bit in town then?
Yes, I'm involved in the Methodist Church quite a little bit, especially in the Women's Society. On the first thing is the water wagon, and the steam engine took a lot of water, and then you'll notice the coal wagon. They had to scoop coal into that, and then the belt that goes to the separator, and you can see the hay racks. There was a hay rack on each side, and the men would take turns of throwing these bundles in. Corn crib on the Big V Ranch is 500 foot long and holding 50,000 bushels of corn. This is a picture of the student of the Lone Tree Schoolhouse northwest of Blackwell, and Leslie Goulden is holding the slate, and this was taken about 19 and 15. Notice the way they're dressed. This is a picture of Leslie's coon hides just before he sold them in 1966. They're all tacked to the south side of his granary. That's Leslie on the far right. Leslie caught 8 coons that one night. That's the most that he ever caught in one night. This is Leslie and our daughter Arlene, and he caught these 3 one night, and they were real large coon, and that was really a good catch. This picture was taken in 1966. Harvey Payne and Andrew Lockridge had been out hunting a deer, and they really got one.